Good evening all. Having had a few requests for a guide on the BMW V12 LMR prototype, but at the same time being generally against doing guides on vehicles I've not had the opportunity to see and photograph in person, at least when there's any prospect of such, hopefully this video, which looks at the racing version of the M1, counts as some sort of appeasement until I can track down a V12 LMR at a track somewhere. Any leads are, as always, welcome. Our story this week opens in the late 1970s on a very happy BMW. After recovering from a rough 1950s, the Neue Klasse had springboarded the company into the newly introduced 3 and 5 series, which had had a very positive impact on the Bavarian balance sheets, and they were now well in the black. With senior leadership interested in turning their recently found large fortunes back into small ones, they gave the head of the nascent M division, Jochen Nierpasch, permission to develop a new racing vehicle to compete against the recently introduced Porsche 935. Building on their successes with the 3.5 CSL Batmobile, Nierpasch knew that another road car-derived competitor would be unlikely to remain competitive against the 935, no matter how much funky aero they added, and so it was back to the drawing board for the Beamer folks. Unusually choosing to develop the race car first and worry about the road car later, and with Mr. Nierpasch insisting on a mid-engined vehicle for better performance, allegedly with a 3-liter V10, they immediately hit a roadblock. BMW had yet to make a mid-engined car, and lacked both the production facilities and the expertise to do so, especially in the volumes needed for homologation, which is about 400 vehicles in total. Rather than spend their first decade totally bankrupting themselves, or wallowing at the back end of the field, they decided to call in some expert assistance. And when it comes to beating the Germans at motor racing, well, nobody does it like the Italians. Alfa and Ferrari were, as usual, disinterested in helping create something that might compete with their own cars. Lancia was still predominantly focused on rallying. Maserati was well into another round of bankruptcies, I think they're 4th at this point. Fiat had just been purchased by Colonel Gaddafi, of all people, and so Lamborghini, looking for a way to shore up their balance sheet after the gas crises of the early 70s, ended up as the recipient of Deutschmarks for design services. With Lamborghini head designer Gianpaolo Dallara, yes, the same chap whose company now builds the M-Hybrid V8, or at least the chassis, leading the majority of the work and BMW providing the engine, the silhouette was inspired by the 1972 turbo concept, although it lacked that vehicle's gull-wing doors. It was powered by a 273 brake horsepower, 3.5-liter straight-six, the V10 having been nixed as too complicated and expensive, and straight-sixes definitely played to BMW's strengths, that was derived from the CSL's power plant. Mated to a ZF 5-speed manual transmission and limited slip differential, sending power to the rear wheels, the lightweight car was capable of 161 miles an hour, or 260 kilometers per hour, and 0 to 62, or 100 kilometers per hour, time in 5.5 seconds in road trim. The racer was uprated to 470 horsepower, using the engine as a flamethrower to shave a second off the 0 to 60 time and ensure a top speed of 193, far more appropriate for a competition variant. But the very stylish Campagnolo wheels were replaced with wider racing versions that definitely lost out on style points. Admittedly, this is not actually a great picture, especially with the dazzle camouflage livery, but look at the flames! Suspension was double wishbones with springs and Bilstein dampers, and all 4 wheels had ventilated disc brakes. Apparently on the road car it was just ventilated discs in the front and solid ones in the rear, but be that as it may. However, it became quickly evident that Lamborghini was burning through cash faster than they could ship it down from Munich. Shortly before the design was finalized and production was set to begin, BMW pulled the plug before Lamborghini went completely bankrupt. This decision, unfortunately, was taken at the same time that the Lamborghini factory workers were on yet another European summer strike, and as a result, BMW was unable to recover any of the prototypes, chassis jigs, or any other design and engineering work that Lamborghini had done up to that point. Allegedly, this resulted in a late-night Mission Impossible-style raid on the Santa Gata facility by a group of BMW employees to recover their intellectual property and the work they'd paid for, which must have been a sight to see and would make for an entertaining little Netflix miniseries. This nighttime caper paid off, however, and BMW recovered their near-complete race car design and either 4 or 7 prototypes. Reports vary. The design still needed completion, and BMW still lacked the capacity to produce the vehicle in the quantities needed, so a program evolved that could be described as ad hoc at best. A group of conveniently former Lamborghini employees had just founded a convenient design consultancy, Ital Design, that conveniently offered to help finish the M1's design. The production of the fiberglass body panels were subcontracted to Trasformazione Italiana Resina, the space frame to Marchesi, and the rolling chassis was assembled and painted back at Ital Design before shipment to Stuttgart, where coach builder Carrozzeria Power installed the drivetrain and remaining interior trim before finally heading to Munich for BMW to undertake quality assurance tests, final tuning, and customer delivery. In reality, this usually meant BMW ended up rebuilding the entire car to meet their standards, but somehow the turn signals still ended up overlooked. Anyway, this game of supply chain pass the parcel meant that by the time production of the required 400 cars, in road or race spec, was set to start in mid-1978, the FIA had, clever and consistent chaps that they are, changed the rules for Groups 4 and 5, in which the M1 was intended to compete, and 400 cars had to be completed before homologation was granted. With annual production only anticipated at 200 cars, this was nothing short of disastrous. The cars wouldn't be able to run at Le Mans or in the World Sports Car Championship until the end of 1980, or likely 1981 at the earliest. It was at that point that Mr. Nearposh had a brainwave, and leveraging connections with members of the F1 Constructors Association, he sold the idea of an M1 Sport Series for F1 races with factory team seats guaranteed to the 5 fastest F1 drivers from that race weekend's Friday free practice. That's a lot of F words in one sentence. Anyway, with the rest of the field filled out by a mishmash of other F1 drivers without conflicts of interest, along with touring and sports car drivers, the series proved sufficiently popular that at least 10 Grand Prix drivers earned factory seats through the 1979 season, and the second and final year of the series featured an expanded calendar that was not solely Formula One based. On December 1st, 1980, the 400-car production threshold was finally crossed, and the M1 was able to fulfill its intended purpose. It campaigned at Le Mans and in the World Sports Car Championship throughout the 1980s, with its final Le Mans appearance in 1986, and was generally competitive and earned several class wins, but never clinched a championship or any particularly noteworthy successes. The road car unfortunately sold poorly, costing more than a contemporaneous Lamborghini Countach, but was well reviewed for its driving dynamics and build quality when compared to most of its Italian rivals. If any of you, dear viewers, would like to see me do a road test of one, I'd be more than happy to, if anybody has one that they'd be willing to lend me for a few hours. Anyway, while we're dreaming, that brings us to the end of another video. Thank you for watching. Photos from this video come from this year's Le Mans Classic, and for this week's call to action not featuring the 3 sacred words of YouTube.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Why not take some time this evening or next week to go through all of your old files, digital or otherwise, and clean out things you no longer need. Not only will you have more space in your storage areas, but it will be easier to find the things you do need in the long run. Have a good evening, everyone.